So this presentation is reflecting on the trial undertaken for the Department for Transport by the University of Southampton wind racers and Solent Transport, and this was of the ultra autonomous aerial vehicle, and this was part of an experiment to set up an air bridge to the Isle of Wight as part of the COVID-19 response. So as part of the Department for Transport's Future Transport Zones project, this work was brought forward after a direct request from the DFT to be on standby to assist St Mary's Hospital if the need arose with their logistics planning as part of the COVID response. So we really were attempting to set up the first autonomous cargo flights across the Solent using this particular drone. So it all kind of kicked off around the 24th of April when Grant Shapps announced the trial as part of the daily COVID-19 briefings. So the pressure really was on to get this, largely experimental aircraft at the time into service. It was very much brought forward ahead of schedule. And as a result of this drive from the Secretary of State, we managed to work with the Civil Aviation Authority to speed up the permissions process in relation to the routings to be used, but also the setup and establishment of the technical danger area across the Solent, which is needed obviously to allow such aircraft to fly in amongst general aviation. So we decided on Route C on the map on the screen. This was running between Lyon Solent and Binstead airfields. Ideally, we would have gone from Southampton Airport, so along Route B, to the Isle of Wight showground, as that was those are the two closest origins and destinations from Southampton General Hospital to St Mary's. But because of the permissions issues, because of obviously the built-up areas around Southampton, the key consideration working with the Civil Aviation Authority was safety. And so Route C allowed for the shortest crossing point over the Solent, but also a passage over largely rural terrain with no built-up areas. So this is the Wind Racer's ultra autonomous aerial vehicle. It's a bit smaller than a Cessna. It's been developed with Wind Racers by the University of Southampton. And so we're looking at moving payloads of around about 40 kilograms maximum, given the takeoff lengths at Binstead Airfield. It has a range, this is Mark 1 of the aircraft, we're now moving on to Mark 2. Mark 1 had a range of about 300 kilometres, and it uses two Briggs and Stratton petrol engines. So it was really designed, the whole scope of this was to build an autonomous aircraft that could be a kind of workhorse, a load lugger, working for rural communities in Africa. A very simple and easy to maintain at its source point. This shows the cargo bay area of Ultra and the types of cargo containment device. So the loading area was around 1.8 metres by 50 centimetres tall by 60 centimetres deep. And we could carry a range of standard size medical Versabacks, typically used in the carriage of patient diagnostics and medicine. So you can see those in the top right-hand corner there, standard insulated carrying cases that are used throughout the NHS supply chain. We used a smaller foam aircraft called Believer, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, which was fitted with all the same avionics and control systems that the Ultra aircraft had. So this was obviously our tester. We used this all the time doing trial runs to make sure all the avionics were working correctly. And that, at the bottom right-hand corner, was the first actual ever load taken by an autonomous aerial vehicle across the Solent, from Lyon Solent to Binstead. It was a rubber duck. So there it is, sat in its little cargo hold on the Believer aircraft. Which is actually of the first crossing over to the Isle of Wight, to Binstead. About 11-minute flight, so very quick to get across. This was obviously the takeoff from Lyon Solent Airport. You'll then see it passing over the Solent. So we had a set route within the technical danger area. We had to obviously get permission with all the general aircraft to take off from Lyon Solent. Obviously it was very quiet during COVID. Here we go over to the mainland. And then you'll see the approach and landing at Binstead, which was essentially, it's a grass airstrip which was built in the early 70s, that was ideal for this landing point. And there we go with a landing at Binstead. So that was actually the first crossing we made on, I think, about the 9th of May with an actual load going over White. So what is the real need, the NHS need going forward, and how might drone logistics be applied? So we've done a lot of work with Southampton General Hospital and St Mary's Hospital to investigate what types of cargo would be most suited to drone logistics going forward. And this will form the large part of the Future Transport Zone's drones project over the next 4 years. So I'm briefly going to go through these kind of core areas and give you some information. So unlike the Ultra aircraft, what is ideally needed is what we call a point-to-point VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing platform, to carry up to probably a maximum of 15 kilograms. So we're looking at patient diagnostics, aseptic medicines, emergency blood and remote community monitoring. So the first area of interest is what we call patient diagnostic samples. So there are around 56 different types of patient diagnostic sample. This shows you a snapshot of some of the core ones, but generally 80% of those relate to either blood, feces or urine. And they all generally come under what's known as the PI 650 packaging regulation. So that's 3-layer packaging. We are talking about dangerous goods here. That's when you have your sample tube with the sample in it, inside a plastic bag, which has some absorbent gauze in case there's a spillage. That's put in another plastic bag, and then it's put in a plastic container, as you can see in the little photograph at the bottom there, which is sealed inside a box. And that satisfies PI 650 and can be carried in any form of transport, basically. To give you some idea, general practitioner GP surgeries can generate anything between, say, 10 and 200 patient samples per day, depending on their size. And these generally have to be analysed within 8 hours of being taken. And to give you some idea, in Southampton as a case study, there are about 12 vans that are doing milk rounds continuously, serving around 75 GP surgeries, and they're collecting about 70,000 samples a month. So it gives you some idea of the scale of this. And the interesting concept is to what extent drones could service some of those more remote surgeries, where a significant proportion of the driver's round is going to a remote area to pick up maybe only a few samples. All of this work is what we call light logistics. It's all under 5 kilograms in weight, and so would be quite suited to drone transportation. Another area for drone applications is the movement of emergency blood stocks. So blood supply is taken from Southampton General Hospital over to St Mary's, and these are generally, these boxes you can see here, they are kind of max out at about 13 kilograms in terms of weight, and take kind of, as you can see, standard kind of transfusion packs on the right hand side there. At the moment, these are taken often by taxi down to the ferry service, Red Funnel. They're put onto the Red Funnel service unaccompanied. They are monitored by a member of staff, and then they're taken off and given to another taxi on the Isle of Wight side. So there's interest in whether you could combine the patient diagnostic movements going from St Mary's to the mainland with blood stock supplies coming back over. And the other thing is that blood for transfusion is not classed as a dangerous good. The third area, which we think is probably the most promising for drone logistics to assist the NHS, is what we call the movement of aseptic medicines, so cytotoxic drugs. And these have to be carried under strict temperature controls, generally chilled. So it's all chemotherapy treatments, essentially. These are often manufactured just in time for the patient, and some have to be administered within 4 hours of being manufactured. So this is very much a just-in-time operation. A care plan will be devised for a cancer patient. They will have regular treatments, but those drugs are manufactured, sometimes, as I'm saying, within 4 hours of them having to be administered. So it's a live order that goes to the manufacturing pharmacy unit. That's then made, and it's got to be driven and administered to the patient in a quick time. So Vidaza, for example, used in the treatment of leukemia, that's one of these quite expensive drugs that has to be administered within a very strict time window. So we're looking at small, lightweight, most of these are well under 5 kilograms, even with the chill packs, urgent movements that are going from a pharmacy manufacturing unit to an administering hospital. And St Mary's on the Isle of Wight lost its aseptic medicine manufacturing unit in July of this year. And so the majority of medicines have to be manufactured at the QA in Portsmouth. Then they're taxied, hovercraft taxi over to the Isle of Wight. So this type of service would be very beneficial. The final one, which is another interesting area, it relates to drones being used to help monitor and diagnose patients in remote communities. So the NHS have procured quite a significant number of oximeters because, particularly related to COVID-19, understanding when someone's blood oxygen level has fallen below 93% has been shown to be key to determining whether they need and when they need to be administered to hospital for treatment. So one idea is that drones could be used to distribute these very small devices to patients in remote communities so that you get an immediate understanding of their current state of health, working alongside NHS Direct. And this is in a very similar way to various defibrillator trials that have been done, where drones have been used to fly defibrillators out to people who've suffered a heart attack. You can get that equipment there much quicker and more effectively. So that's quite an interesting way in which drones, also fitted with cameras, could potentially drop these devices but also take a photograph of the patient while they're there. So to finish and summarise, I think some of the key lessons learned from the trials and work that we've been doing is, first of all, there are a lot of drones currently on the market, but very few are actually suitable for specimen movement. It's a lot of people who've made drones. It's a drone looking for a problem to solve. And they are certainly very few are designed around the current packaging regulations, PI 650. It is really pointless trying to get the packaging industry, particularly because that's guided and dictated by the requirements of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulation Agency, to design, on a miniaturized scale for drones. The drone has to be able to carry the standard units, which are basically more often than not 450mm by 300mm by 300mm boxes. That's the kind of the standard that's moved. The other key problem is that the European Aviation Safety Authority, EASA, is likely to dictate that drones have to have a crash-proof container in which goods will be held. Those requirements and those specifications have not been released yet. So nothing can really be moved until that work, which is a lot of research, has been undertaken. The second key point is that this all relates to dangerous goods approval. And at the moment, there's no autonomous aerial vehicle has been given dangerous goods carriage approval anywhere in the world as far as we're aware. Dangerous goods regulations basically fall between fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft, and it hasn't been applied to aircraft that obviously don't have a pilot. So members of the safety team, the drone team, would have to be trained in DG, but how does that actually operate? And also on top of that, not only satisfying those safety requirements from the Civil Aviation Authority, etc., the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulation Agency also need assurance that the drone, the platform as we call it, will not in itself cause any adverse effects to the medical cargoes being carried in terms of temperature issues or particularly vibration. And that's something we've been looking at more latterly and ongoing. So we're doing various experimental work with King's College to understand what the implications of vibration being passed from the platform itself, from the drone, through the packaging to the cargo might have, and particularly for things like certain chemotherapy treatments, they can't be shaken. Obviously, certain blood cells will be damaged under certain levels of vibration, and that's an important thing to understand, and not much research has been done on that. Equally, one has to be able to demonstrate that the temperature of blood stocks and patient diagnostics can be maintained throughout the logistics passage. So, and we know from the trials that we've done using calibrated thermometers that we can maintain 2 degrees temperature for over 12 hours, very satisfactory, because that's a product of all of the QA work that's done on the current chilled packaging, and it's usually extremely well done. The final thing relates to the automated pickup system. So we talked about VTOLs, and this is the work we're doing with Motion Robotics at the moment. You can see one of their trial drones. So this is for automated drop-off. and the blood bag being dropped here, you don't really want practitioners in the field at hospitals going anywhere near devices like this. You need to be able to pick it up and release it in an automated way. That is, obviously we've got to have a look at the crash worthiness of that as well, with the EASA potential regulations. So how would that, if that was dropped from 400 feet, what might be the impact then? But looking at the automated nature of this, and equally, the key thing with drones at the moment is you have to have safety pilots by law, humans to oversee the potential landing and takeoff. To make these anywhere near commercially viable, you need to take those away, the requirement for that, and have it literally as a push-button automated system from the point of origin to the point of destination. And we are, a fair way away from that. It's technically very possible, but in terms of the regulation side, that is quite difficult. So those are some of obviously the key lessons learned. And if anyone's got any questions, I'll be very happy to actually talk to anyone. Thank you very much.